The Missouri Ozarks have a way of swallowing sound. Wind moves differently there, slower, heavier, pressing through the hills and oak forests as if the land itself is breathing. Locals say the woods don't echo the way other forests do. Noise gets absorbed. Footsteps disappear. Voices fade faster than they should. And on a warm autumn morning 4 years ago, that silence became the last witness to a family of 3 who vanished without a trace. No screams were heard. No struggle was reported. No emergency call was ever made. Just 3 people who entered the Ozarks to explore nature and never came back. 4 years later, when a single pink long-sleeve shirt emerged from beneath the tangled roots of an ancient oak tree, the silence finally broke. But instead of answers, it left investigators with more questions than they've ever had. There is no arrest, no confirmed suspect, no clear explanation. Only fragments, timelines, overlooked details, and a disappearance so unsettling that even seasoned investigators still admit they have no idea what truly happened that day. If stories like this matter to you, stories that don't rush, don't exaggerate, and don't give you easy answers, take a moment to support this channel. Subscribe, like this video, share it with someone who loves true crime, and leave a comment with your thoughts as the story unfolds. Your engagement keeps these cases alive, and sometimes it's the audience that notices what investigators missed. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Marcus Hill was 29 years old. Friends described him as calm, thoughtful, and quietly protective. An African-American man who worked in logistics, Marcus had a routine-driven life. He planned ahead. He double-checked things. He didn't take unnecessary risks. His partner, Evelyn Chin Hill, was 28. Born and raised in the United States, Evelyn was a white Asian woman whose parents had immigrated decades earlier. She worked remotely as a graphic designer, loved photography, and had an almost spiritual appreciation for nature. Forests, trails, open skies, those were the places she felt most grounded. Their son, Noah Hill, was 6 years old. Noah had his father's features: dark hair, brown eyes, and a smile that lingered just a second longer than most. He was curious in the way children are when the world still feels safe. He asked endless questions. He liked bugs. He liked rocks. He liked being outdoors with his parents. That weekend, Marcus, Evelyn, and Noah packed their SUV and drove south into the Missouri Ozarks for what was supposed to be a simple nature getaway. Nothing extreme. No off-grid survival plans. No risky backcountry routes. Just a few trails, a camera, a backpack, and time together. The Ozarks stretch across southern Missouri in a vast, uneven sprawl of ridges, hollows, and dense woodland. Some areas are heavily trafficked. Others are barely mapped. The hills chose a known trail system near a state conservation area. Not remote, not isolated. Cell service was spotty but not non-existent. Families hiked there all the time. On the morning they arrived, Marcus sent a photo to his sister. It showed Evelyn standing near the trailhead sign, sunlight filtering through the trees behind her. Noah stood in front, wearing a pink long-sleeve shirt, slightly oversized, the sleeves bunched at his wrists. He was smiling, holding a small stick like it was treasure. "Quick hike," Marcus texted. "Back by evening." That message would be the last confirmed communication from any of them. By nightfall, Marcus's sister noticed something felt wrong. They were supposed to check in. They always did. A text. A photo. Something. By morning, the concern turned into panic. Calls went unanswered. Messages undelivered. Their phones went straight to voicemail. Local authorities were notified late the next afternoon. At first, it was treated as a delay. A wrong turn. A dead phone battery. Rangers noted that families occasionally underestimated the trails. But as hours turned into days, the situation shifted. Search teams were deployed. Dogs were brought in. Volunteers formed lines through the woods, stepping carefully, scanning the ground for anything out of place. They found nothing. No footprints leading off trail. No dropped backpack. No torn fabric. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Even the SUV, parked neatly at the trailhead, told its own unsettling story. Inside were snacks. A child's water bottle. A folded map. No sign of urgency. No sign of panic. It was as if the family had simply stepped into the trees and evaporated. Investigators ran through the possibilities. Got lost. Unlikely. The trail was well marked. Marcus was known for planning. And Noah was only 6. Wandering aimlessly didn't make sense. Accidental injury. Possible, but where were the signs? No disturbed earth. No broken branches. No indication of a fall or collapse. Wildlife encounter. Extremely rare, especially with 3 people together. And again, no physical evidence. Voluntary disappearance. Friends and family rejected it immediately. No financial preparation. No personal issues. No reason to vanish with a child. Every explanation raised more questions than it answered. As weeks passed, the search slowed. As months passed, hope faded. As years passed, the case grew cold. Until something changed. It was early spring when a local hiker noticed something strange near the base of a massive oak tree. The roots were old, thick, twisted, rising from the soil like knuckles. Recent storms had shifted the ground slightly, exposing what looked like a piece of fabric caught beneath the roots. At first, it seemed unimportant. Trash, maybe. But when the hiker pulled gently, the fabric didn't come free. Authorities were called. What they uncovered stopped the investigation from fading into obscurity forever. A child's pink long-sleeve shirt. Weathered. Faded. But unmistakable. It matched the description and photographs of the shirt Noah Hill had been wearing the day his family disappeared. DNA later confirmed it belonged to him. The same child. The same family. The same unanswered questions. But what terrified investigators most wasn't just what was found. It was where it was found. Because that oak tree had been searched before. And somehow, this shirt hadn't been there. And as forensic teams began re-examining the ground beneath those roots, one realization started to take hold. If the evidence appeared years later, then someone, or something, may have wanted it found only now. The oak tree stood less than half a mile from the main trail. That fact alone unsettled investigators. It wasn't hidden deep in the wilderness. It wasn't miles off course. It wasn't somewhere a lost child might accidentally wander into after days of exposure. It was close. Too close. When forensic teams arrived, the area was cordoned off immediately. The massive oak, estimated to be well over a century old, had roots that rose above the soil like ribs. Years of erosion, rainfall, and foot traffic had packed dirt tightly beneath them. And yet, beneath one of those roots, wedged where the ground should have been undisturbed, lay Noah Hill's pink long-sleeve shirt. The question investigators couldn't stop asking was simple. How did it get there? And why hadn't anyone seen it before? At first glance, the shirt looked old, but not destroyed. The fabric was faded, dulled by time and moisture. The cuffs were frayed. There were traces of dirt and organic debris embedded in the fibers. But there were things missing. No tearing. No animal bite marks. No blood stains. No evidence of prolonged exposure to the elements the way investigators expected after 4 years outdoors. One forensic analyst reportedly said something that stuck with everyone in the room. "This shirt looks aged, but not abandoned." The shirt didn't appear to have been dragged through underbrush. It didn't look like it had been washed downstream by rain. And it certainly didn't look like it had been buried naturally beneath an oak root system that old. Roots grow slowly. They don't suddenly wrap around fabric. Which meant one of two things had to be true. Either the shirt had been placed there long after the disappearance, or someone had manipulated the ground in a way that defied natural explanation. The shirt was sent for testing. Within days, the result came back. It belonged to Noah Hill, the 6-year-old boy who had vanished with his parents without leaving a single trace behind. The confirmation reopened wounds that had barely healed for the family. Marcus's sister reportedly broke down when she was notified. Evelyn's parents, who had held on to hope for years, were forced to confront the reality that something terrible had happened. But even with DNA confirmation, investigators were no closer to knowing what had happened. Because the shirt didn't answer the most important question. Where was the child? Search records from 4 years earlier showed something deeply troubling. That oak tree had been within a grid that was already searched. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. Dogs had passed through the area. Volunteers had walked within feet of the tree. Cadaver dogs had shown no alerts. There was no documented reason for the shirt to have been missed. Unless it hadn't been there. This realization changed everything. If the shirt appeared years later, then someone, or something, had returned to that location. And that raised a chilling possibility investigators had avoided saying out loud. This wasn't just a disappearance. It might have been a delayed message. One of the first assumptions people made online was that Noah had wandered off on his own. Investigators quickly shut that theory down. A 6-year-old child doesn't remove his shirt and neatly place it beneath tree roots. There were no other items found nearby. No shoes. No bones. No personal effects. Nothing that suggested a slow progression of exposure or survival attempts. If Noah had been alone out there, there would have been signs. Instead, the evidence suggested something much more controlled. Something deliberate. The discovery of the shirt reignited searches for the parents. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. Nearby waterways were re-examined. Old tips were reopened. Nothing. No trace of Marcus Hill. No trace of Evelyn Hill. No clothing. No remains. No belongings. 3 people vanished. Only one item came back. And it belonged to the smallest, most vulnerable member of the family. As investigators reviewed old statements, one detail suddenly gained new weight. A park volunteer had reported seeing a family matching their description that morning. Marcus, Evelyn, and a child, talking briefly with another person near a trail junction. At the time, the sighting seemed unimportant. The volunteer couldn't remember much. Just that the interaction felt normal. No argument. No raised voices. No obvious distress. But now, years later, investigators wondered if that brief interaction had been the last moment the family was truly seen. And if so, who was the other person? Despite renewed efforts, no one has ever been definitively identified. No clear suspect. No sketch. No name. Just a vague description of an adult figure, gender uncertain, wearing outdoor clothing, standing close enough to speak with the family. Not threatening. Not alarming. Just present. And that might be the most disturbing part. Because predators don't always look dangerous. Sometimes they look ordinary. One investigator would later say something chilling during an off-record conversation. It's almost like whoever did this wanted to remind us the child existed. The shirt didn't lead to bodies. It didn't reveal a crime scene. It didn't provide closure. It reopened pain. It forced attention back onto a case that had gone quiet. And it did so without revealing the truth. When news of the shirt broke, online speculation exploded. Some believed the Ozarks themselves were responsible. Sinkholes, hidden caverns, unexplored terrain. Others believed someone local knew more than they were saying. But law enforcement remained cautious. There was no proof of homicide. No proof of an accident. No proof of an abduction. Only circumstantial details that pointed in one unsettling direction. Human involvement without human fingerprints. If someone was responsible, why wait 4 years? Why place only the shirt? Why choose a location that had already been searched? And why leave no other trace, no ransom, no message, no evidence of motive? Every theory collapsed under scrutiny, which left investigators with the most terrifying possibility of all. What if the truth wasn't hidden because it was clever, but because it was simple, and no one had thought to look for it? As the case was quietly reclassified and resources slowly pulled back again, one investigator wrote a note in the file that has never been publicly explained. It read, "Evidence may have been staged to control discovery timeline." Once the shirt was logged, photographed, tested, and reburied into evidence storage, the case entered a strange second life. Not a reopening. Not a reinvestigation. Something quieter. Files were pulled. Old notes reread. Details that once felt irrelevant were suddenly circled in red. Investigators didn't announce breakthroughs, but behind closed doors, the tone shifted. Because the more they reviewed the disappearance of Marcus, Evelyn, and 6-year-old Noah Hill, the clearer one thing became. This case didn't stand alone. Southern Missouri has long carried stories people hesitate to tell out loud. Disappearances that never made national headlines. Hikers who vanished without remains. Hunters who left campsites intact and never returned. Most were dismissed as accidents. Terrain. Exposure. Wildlife. But when analysts overlaid maps from the last 20 years, patterns emerged. Families. Small groups. Day trips. Well-marked trails. And in more than one case, a single item found years later, far too intact to match the timeline. A boot beneath a fallen log. A jacket folded near a creek. A backpack placed beside a trail marker. Evidence that didn't degrade the way it should have. Evidence that appeared when attention had already faded. The Hills case fit that pattern too well. Investigators revisited the original timeline minute by minute. The family arrived mid-morning. They were seen near the trail junction shortly after. By early afternoon, they were gone. There was no indication they had stayed late. No evidence they'd gone deeper into the forest. No signs of backtracking. Which raised a crucial question. How do 3 people disappear in broad daylight without a struggle? Marcus was physically capable. Evelyn was alert and cautious. And Noah, while small, was vocal. If something violent had happened, someone would have heard it. Unless violence wasn't necessary. Criminal psychologists brought in years later offered a chilling theory. People comply when they believe cooperation keeps them safe. A friendly voice. An offer of help. A sense of authority. No weapons needed. No shouting. No panic. Just trust, exploited at exactly the wrong moment. And once that trust is broken, silence follows. The pink shirt became the center of everything. Investigators re-examined it again and again. The collar was slightly stretched, but not torn. The seams were intact. There were faint soil stains on the back, but not the front, which suggested something specific. The shirt may have been removed deliberately. Not ripped. Not torn off. Taken off. And children don't remove their clothes in moments of fear. They do it when someone tells them to. This question haunted the case. Why not Marcus's jacket? Why not Evelyn's camera strap? Why not something that belonged to both adults? Why leave only the child's clothing? One investigator theorized it served a purpose. Not as evidence, but as confirmation. Confirmation that the family had been together. Confirmation that the child didn't wander alone. Confirmation that the disappearance was real. And perhaps confirmation that whoever was responsible wanted that known. Botanists consulted on the case were blunt. There was no natural explanation for the shirt's position. Roots that thick take decades to form. Soil beneath them remains compacted unless disturbed. The ground showed signs of recent manipulation. Not digging. Not burial. Placement. Someone had tucked the shirt beneath the root and covered it just enough to keep it hidden, until erosion did the rest. Which meant the shirt hadn't been there 4 years ago. It had been placed after the searches ended. This realization sent a chill through everyone involved. Because to place that shirt, someone had to return to the area, know where the family vanished, know where searches had occurred, know where to hide evidence without drawing attention. That's not a stranger passing through. That's someone familiar with the land. When investigators quietly began asking questions again, something else became clear. People were careful with their words. Not hostile. Not uncooperative. Just guarded. Tips dried up quickly. Memories blurred. Descriptions became vague. It wasn't that people knew exactly what happened. It was that they didn't want to guess out loud. In small communities near the Ozarks, speculation has consequences. The unidentified adult seen near the trail junction resurfaced as a focal point. New interviews were conducted. Photos from nearby areas were reviewed. Surveillance from distant roads was perceived, but nothing clear emerged. No one could confidently say who that person was. But multiple witnesses recalled the same detail. He didn't look lost. He looked comfortable. Like someone who belonged there. Despite everything, the case remained frustratingly incomplete. No bodies. No blood. No witnesses to violence. No clear suspect. Legally, investigators were stuck. Emotionally, they were convinced something was very wrong. Because accidents don't erase people. Before the case was once again downgraded due to lack of new leads, a senior investigator added one final entry. It wasn't meant for the public. It simply read, "Evidence suggests post-event manipulation. Motive unknown. Subject unknown. Method unknown. Probability of voluntary disappearance negligible." In other words, they didn't leave. They didn't get lost. And they didn't disappear by accident. And yet, the most important question still had no answer. If someone did this, why has no one ever slipped up? 4 years after Marcus Hill, Evelyn Chin Hill, and their 6-year-old son Noah walked into the Missouri Ozarks, the case remains open. Not cold. Not closed. Just unresolved. And that distinction matters. Because unresolved cases aren't forgotten, they're suspended in time, waiting for something to shift. A mistake. A confession. A single detail seen differently. But in this case, nothing has shifted. Only the silence. Privately, investigators acknowledge several possibilities. None of them can be confirmed. None of them can be dismissed. A targeted encounter. Someone familiar with the trails notices a family, approaches them under the guise of friendliness or authority, and leads them off path. No force. No witnesses. Just trust, misplaced once. An opportunistic predator. Someone waiting, watching, knowing the rhythms of the forest and the habits of visitors. Someone who understands how quickly people disappear there. A planned removal. Not spontaneous. Not chaotic. Something thought through, clean, controlled, and deliberately hidden. Each theory has flaws. And yet, each explains something the others cannot. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Hills disappearance is the absence of struggle. Experts say this points toward containment, not chaos. If violence happened, it didn't happen where anyone could hear it. If resistance occurred, it was neutralized quickly. And if fear set in, it came too late. This wasn't a moment. It was a process. Noah's pink long-sleeve shirt remains the emotional core of the case. Because it represents a child who trusted the adults around him. A child who followed instructions. A child who didn't know he was in danger. Investigators believe Noah was with his parents until the very end. Not lost. Not abandoned. Together. And yet, only his shirt came back. Which suggests something deliberate. Something symbolic. Something meant to be found. Why leave the shirt? Some believe it was guilt. Others believe it was control. But one theory persists among those closest to the case. The shirt was proof. Proof that the disappearance wasn't a rumor. Proof that the child existed. Proof that the case still mattered. And perhaps proof that whoever did this was still watching. Investigators quietly admit that whoever placed the shirt likely knew the area well. Well enough to avoid cameras. Well enough to avoid witnesses. Well enough to know when attention had faded. That kind of familiarity doesn't come from a map. Comes from time. Despite everything, no suspect has ever been officially named. Because suspicion is not evidence. And in a case with no bodies, no crime scene, and no clear timeline, certainty is impossible. People have been questioned. Names have been whispered. But nothing has held. And so the file remains open. Marcus's sister still drives past Trailhead sometimes, hoping for something, anything, that might have been missed. Evelyn's parents keep her photos on a shelf, frozen in a life that never aged past 28. And Noah remains 6 years old in every memory. No graduation. No birthdays. No future. Just a pink shirt beneath an oak tree. Despite the uncertainty, there are things law enforcement agrees on. The family did not disappear voluntarily. They did not die in a simple accident. And they were not separated that day. Something intervened. Something human. But whether that intervention was malicious, opportunistic, or calculated, no one can say for sure. The trail is still open. Families still hike it. Children still run ahead. Photos are still taken at the same sign. And most of them have no idea what happened there. Because the Ozarks don't announce their secrets. They keep them. The discovery of the shirt didn't solve the case. It changed it. It confirmed that someone had come back. that the disappearance wasn't just an event, it was a narrative still being controlled by someone unseen. And until more evidence emerges, the story ends where it began, with questions. If this story disturbed you, good, because unresolved cases should disturb us. They should make us question how easily people can vanish, and how silence can protect the truth. If you believe cases like this deserve attention, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it so more people hear their names. And in the comments, tell us what you think happened in the Missouri Ozarks that day. Was it chance? Was it planning? Or was it something even darker? Because somewhere between those oak roots and the quiet hills, the truth is still waiting to be found. And maybe someone out there knows exactly where it is.